Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us once again. We're continuing with the Basic Infinity Engine modding series. We kind of covered all the requested topics, so we have a spare day. So I thought today maybe we do kits because that seems to be something else that beginner modders love to take a shot at. So if you have a kit idea, post it in chat because essentially I'm going to spend the first part of it kind of talking about how kits work generally, and then if we have like a specific example, we can try to actually make a kit in the second part of today. So first, I'm just going to talk about what is actually involved in making a kit, and then we'll kind of go on to the practical side of it. So kits are a little complicated in that being as they're almost like classes, there are a ton of like 2DA files that define like rules for classes and kits. And so just from a pragmatic standpoint, you have to update like 10 to 15 2DA files in order to get your kit like registered and shown as part of like character creation. Now, the good news is that Waidu has a command that will, you can put basically all of those additions and changes and definitions into a single command and it will do it for you, which is nice. However, the EEs then came along. So AdKit's been in Waidu forever. Then the EEs came along and they soft coded a bunch of other things. So that added like 5 to 10 more files where you could define things for your kits, like, how they accumulate thief points, what their default starting coloring should be, which is, for something like which is really useful for something like a cleric kit where the DD has a specific color scheme. It's a nice tie-in where you can make your cleric kit like tie into the DD's colors. Stuff like default biography for the kit. So those sorts of things were added by the EE. So an ad kit doesn't cover those. So what ended up happening was originally, I think it was Mylock, may have been Wisp, add a little function that basically you would run Waidu's ad kit and then you would add a little function that covered all the little EE specific 2DAs, and then eventually Argent combined them into one big function that does everything for you in a one-stop shop. So, for example, if you look at an older kit, so this is the Oozemaster from Divine Remix. So this is ad kit. This is how you would make, hello, Choco. This is how you would make a kit in like the original Baldur's Gate 2 or engines based on them. These are all essentially like appends to the various 2DA files. We'll go through this. I just want to show it to you first. This is like the collab file, and then these 3 strings are like the name, and then like the help string, which is essentially like the kit description. And then what you would end up doing is you would run this little function at the end that basically says, if this is, if we're on the enhanced edition, in this case, the only EE feature I'm taking advantage of is I want to define unique class coloring. All right, this is going to go into class color.2da. And again, we'll cover all this stuff. But so this is like if you had a kit made before, you would just toss on this function to round it up for the EEs. These days, though, you want to start with something with AdKitX. And this is a function. You notice this is directly a Waidu command. This is a function, right? We're launch action function AdKitX. So, and this is not part of Waidu, so you need to include the library. This is like the library to enable this. But you'll see there's a lot of similarities, right? You've got the 3 strings. These are like the name of the kit and the help. And then you'll notice a lot of the same information. And so this basically takes the place of add kit and that function. And if you're making kits today, you want to start with AdKitX because it's the one-stop shop. It's backwards compatible, so if you were to run this on original Baldur's Gate 2, it'll work fine. It'll just ignore all the EE specific stuff. So like I said, we're gonna talk a little bit about what files we're modifying here. You know, like what is class wep, what is webprof, what is all these AB files. Because, like I said, these are all files that you need to modify for a kit. The good news is most of them are fairly trivial edits. So let's go back to the documentation for the original ad kit. And so it basically says, here are all the things. These are all 2DA files that we're going to modify. So we're going to start with first kit list. So this is the master file of kits that are in the game. So, you know, you've got your Berserker, you've got your Wizard Slayer. You'll recognize all these kits. And so these are kind of the basic information you need for all of them, right? These are the strings, these are their names, right? If we were to open these up, 25,179, right? And it's lower. So this is the kit's name in lowercase, 25,151. This is going to be the mixed case. So we now have a capital B, and then 25,201 is going to be like the kit description, right? So this is all stuff that you're going to see like a character creation. When you click on the Berserker and it says, hey, here's, you know, a little bit about the kit. Here's the advantages, the disadvantages, etc. The abilities. This is the table that sets like what abilities you get, what perks you get at what level, etc. and so on. These are traditionally you'll hear these called like kit ability tables or just collab files, because you notice all of these are collab something or other. And even though the true class kits aren't, like, you notice fighter isn't listed here, but fighters, the true classes also have their own collab table. So just a generic fighter uses collab FI01. And just like a generic paladin uses collab PA01. So the true class kits also have their own ability tables. Proficiency, this is what column we use to determine how many pips we can put in stuff. This ties into webprof, which we'll look at in just a moment. Unusable, this is also something we'll talk about in a moment. This tells the engine which bits to look at in an item to determine unusability, like whether or not a kit can use an item or not. Class, this is the, what is the master class for this kit, right? Is this a paladin kit? Is this a fighter kit? Is this a thief kit? The class values come from class.ids. And then finally, it's this column, kit IDS, is actually not present on the OBG2, but this is basically the matching value that you're going to find in kit.ids, which is used for scripting. So this is kind of your table of all the kits and basic information about them. AdKit or AdKitX basically fills this out for you depending on the information that you give it. So kit list is kind of the big one. But now we can just search through 2DA files, and you can see this will give you an idea of like where you have to mention, like how many mentions kits have, right? You notice we've got 20 hits just in 2DA files of all the places where like the Wizard Slayer kit gets mentioned. So if we pop back to the ad kit definition really quick, all right, the first thing it mentions is class web. So let's take a look at, here. So let's take a look at class web. This is actually a leftover file from BG, and is like you'll notice like small sword, long sword, blunt, missile, bow, spiked, axe, and spear. These were basically the Baldur's Gate, the original Baldur's Gate, not even Baldur's Gate 2 weapon proficiencies. So your kit does need to be listed here, and if it's a 1, it means it can use it. If it's a 0, it means it can't. These are actually not used anywhere in the game, but these are still a nice thing to fill out. So class web is kind of outdated, but it still expects you to have an entry here. So, fighters obviously get most. Something like clerics don't get the pointy stuff. Mages essentially get nothing. So you'll notice like, let me pull up the ad kit for... So the first entry is ad kit 0011. This is a druid kit. So basically 001101. So it says no to small sword, no to large swords, yes to blunt, yes to missile, no to bow, yes to spike, no to axe, no to spear. So, and it's a druid kit. It doesn't have any special weapon restrictions. So that's your first line. Next up is Wep Prof. Now this one is very critical, especially since this is where people love to differentiate their kit. Weapon proficiencies is how many pips or stars you can put in a specific weapon. So this is the master weapon proficiency table for the game. It still has the first little bit of this is the leftover Baldur's Gate 1 proficiencies. You can put values here, but for the most part, you want to zero these. Actually, do we want to zero these? Yeah, you want to. Actually, I take that back. You probably want these to match whatever you did for class web. These aren't actually used in game, but just by tradition, you usually fill this out as if they're legitimate proficiencies. But then you have all of these should look familiar to anybody who's played: bastard sword, long sword, short sword, axe, two-handed swords, etc., etc. Note that club is the one weird one. Note how it's out of sequence. The other thing, if you play on original Baldur's Gate 2, club proficiency is actually listed as like extra. This will be listed as like extra 1. It won't even be named club. So just something to be aware of. Like, for whatever reason, when BG2 originally shipped, they didn't bother naming the club proficiency. So if you look at something like a mage, right? So let's go ahead and hide it. And then your 4 weapon styles are here as well, right? If two-handed weapon, sword and shield, single weapon, and the 2 weapon, which is dual wielding. So all the weapons are here. So this is what actually gets functionally used in the game, this block. So you look at mages, right? Mages get a point in daggers. Oh, and these are maximums, right? So you notice like fighter has 5. So fighters can go up to grand mastery in daggers. Mages can go up to 1. Quarterstaff, mages can put a point. Darts and slings, again, a point. No weapon styles, and then everything else is zeros. Whereas fighters, it's basically 5s all the way down. And then the weapon styles, they get 2 in each, and then 3 in dual wielding as a max. This is also where you'll notice in here there's also the multi-classes. This is how the game limits multi-classes to 2 pips, right? You notice fighters got 5s all through this board. Fighter mages get 2s. This is why fighter mages could only do 2 pips instead of 5. But all the classes and kits are here. So, and like I said, since people really like to distinguish kits based on, what weapon proficiencies they can place, this line, the weapon proficiency line, is very important. Also note that this table includes, it goes down to single weapon, it goes down to dual wielding, and then it's got like these extra lines. These have to be 0. Have to be. And the reason why is the original Baldur's Gate had a bug where you would get to, where you would level up and it'd say, oh, you've got a pip to place. Well, if you've placed points in all of your legitimate proficiencies, it skips that screen, right? Even if you had earned a pip, it knows that you're maxed out. It'll skip that screen. If some of these values were non-zero, like if you had a 1 in extra 8, you would get trapped at that screen because the engine is convinced you have a proficiency you can place because this is not 0. And you basically get soft locked on that screen of basically like, you have a pip to place, you need to place it, but you can't place it. So you would get soft locked. So all of these extra values have to be zeros. So essentially this weapon prof is always going to end with like 18 zeros at least, because all of those extra fields need to be zeroed. So that's Wep Prof. Next is the AB class requirements. So these are the AB 2DA fields. These generally are like your basic class requirements, and then your requirements to dual class into and out of this kit. So this is the class requirements is just the very basic. What are the minimum scores you need? Like for a mage, you need to have 9 int, and that's it. That's the only requirement to be a mage. For a fighter, you need to have 9 strength, as opposed to say a paladin where you need to have 12 strength, 9 con, 13 whiz, and 17 charisma. So The other thing, one other thing to be very aware of is that low minimums are actually a benefit in the game. So if we were sitting down and playing tabletop, right, and we're rolling ability scores, and I wanted to be a paladin, I would have to legitimately roll these scores, right? If I rolled charisma and I got a 13, I can't be a paladin, sorry. In the engine, if I tell it you pick your class and your kit before you roll your scores. Before you roll your scores. So the engine will essentially cheat and make sure that you always reach your minimum. So it will come, it will come to roll your charisma and it sees you need a 17. If it rolls a 13, it throws it away and it'll re-roll it. And it'll keep re-rolling it until you get at least a 17. So minimum requirements are a benefit to your class, not a detriment. So just keep that in mind when you're trying to design for balance and other stuff. Next up is all right, so that was AB class mod. AB class mod. So these are going to be what penalties or bonuses are applied to scores because you've picked a kit. So for example, if you're a beast friend, notice you get -2 to strength and -2 to con. This is the Beast Master. Oftentimes you'll notice the internal names of a kit is different than what's used in game. The most classic of this are the Ranger kits, which are like the Farallon and the Justifier instead of the Archer and the I'm blanking on the name. The Farallon. Yeah, see, there's the Farallon. That's actually the Archer kit. So the internal name doesn't necessarily match what's going on in the game. And there's also typos. Notice that the assassin is missing an S. It should be a double ass. Instead, we've got an ass and an as. So these just need to be consistent. So, but back to the point, AB class mod, basically if there needs to be penalties or bonuses to ability scores for picking the kits, this would be where you set them. You can see for the most part, this isn't used. It's used very rarely. Next up is the ABDC DS requirement. So this is, I can't remember. This is going to be one of the dual class requirements, and I can't remember if this is from or to. So let's just open it up. ABDCDS. So these are the minimum requirements to duel into a kit. And note the classes are also defined. All right, so if you're a mage and you want to dual class into fighter, you need 17 strength. If you want to dual class into a ranger, you need 17 strength, 17 dex. So you notice all of the kits are down here. For the most part, the kits basically use the same requirements as their parent class, but you can do something different if you want to. They don't have to. So that's what this file is. And then next up this is the requirements to duel out of this class. So if you're a fighter and you want to duel to something else, you need to have 15 strength. Right? And same deal. For the most part, kits will use the same requirements as their parent class, but they don't have to. And I should note, normally you can't duel into class, so this is kind of pointless, but there are mods that allow you to do it, so you still want to put legitimate values in here, even though by default you can't duel into a class. So these are your duel into and duel out of requirements. Sorry, let's go back to add kit. And then we have dual class. Now this basically defines, can you even dual class? Right? So this determines, right, if I'm a mage, and if it's a 1, it's allowed. If it's 0, it's not allowed, right? So if I'm a mage, I can duel into fighter, I can duel into cleric. Obviously, I can't duel into mage. I can duel into thief, but not druids or rangers. And again, for the most part, the kits of a class follow the same convention as their parent, but again, they don't have to. And if you want to make a kit that you don't want people to be able to dual class out of, you just put zeros across the board. For example, if you look internally, like barbarians and wild mages are technically kits. So they should be listed here. Am I just missing them? I don't think they're listed here. Okay. So if you wanted to make a kit that you can't duel out of, you just put zeros here. Also keep in mind that just because, you make a druid kit and you allow it to duel into mage, there is no underlying druid mage class, so it's not going to let you do it anyway. We still cannot expand the base classes, right? There's no druid mage in the base game, so you can't get around that by trying to do a sneaky dual class. It just doesn't work that way. So, but this sets what you're allowed to duel into, and the appropriate name dual class. Next up is the alignment. This is basically, what's the allowed alignment for your kits. So, mages can be any alignment. Most could be any alignment, but then you have stuff like the paladins can only be lawful good. Can only be lawful good. You have something like ranger, which can be lawful good, neutral good, or chaotic good. You have something like bard that can only be like the 5 neutral alignments. So, if you've got your 5 up top, lawful good, lawful neutral, lawful evil, same for these, and then same for the chaotics. So if you want your kit to be like evil only or lawful only or whatever your requirement is, 1 means it's allowed, 0 means it's not. So you basically designate your 9 alignments, whether it's allowed or not here. Again, generally, these match the parent classes, but they don't have to. Next up is the collab. Okay, so the collab, we're going to talk about this in depth a lot more, but I am going to go ahead and show you a collab now. So this is, let's just look at, this is your basic Bard collab file. Actually, let's look at like a Paladin collab. This is your basic Paladin. So it's simple. These are, you've got as many rows as you need. Like if we were to look at the monk table has like 20 rows because monks get a ton of abilities. But you have, these are the levels across top. So like at level 1, the paladin gains these 6 abilities. And we can look at, so GA means that they're gaining ability. Like this is something that they're given that they can like cast and use. Something like, if the other option you'll see is an AP, something that's applied. So think of an ability you would gain, like for a paladin, we're saying like, you can cast Detect Evil once per day, right? That would be a gained ability. Protection from Evil would be a gained ability. Kai, the Berserker Enrage, the Monk's Quivering Palm, the Assassin's Poison, right? Those are all abilities that you gain, that you activate, right? They show up on your innate bar and they activate. As opposed to something that's applied. Something like the Jester's Bard Song, how it's different than the normal bards, that is done through the application of a spell. Like the Ranger bonuses to the Archer's bonus to ranged attacks, that is something that is applied via these spells. So you can either gain or apply a spell. And then this is the actual spell name. So if we were to look up special, here, let's go ahead and actually look these up so we can see. So we're getting special 211, 212, and 213. So we can actually just look at those spells and see what they are. And you'll see these will jive with actual paladin abilities, whenever it feels like it. So 211 is Lay on Hands. So right here at level 1, we're getting 1 casting of Lay on Hands. We're getting 4 212s. 212 is, you get 4 castings of Detect Evil at level 1, and you get 1 casting of Protection Evil at level 1. And then as you notice at level 2, we're getting another Protection and another Detect Evil. And that every level, you get another casting of these. And this will go all the way out to level 40. Now, these kit ability tables by default generally go to level 40 because that was below the experience cap for the original Baldur's Gate 2. When you make your own tables, take them all the way out to 50 because most people play, I should say most, a lot of people play with the experience cap removed. And so if you build the table out to 50, that means they'll continue getting abilities like on the schedule that you want them to get them. So even though the normal tables only go to 40, when you build your table, build it out to 50. Because otherwise, like Tweak's Anthology, when it removes the experience cap, if it sees that a kit table only goes to 40, it will try to extend the missing bit, but it's not perfect, right? It does it by an algorithm and some assumptions and some guesses. If you just build your table out to 50, you're going to get exactly what you want, all the way to, if somebody were to actually pursue your kit, all the way to level 50. So build your tables out to 50 by default, even though the engine only uses 40. So and we're going to be talking more about ability tables, because this is kind of the core of your kit, right? This is the number one thing that you're probably going to be working on and making unique to your kit is the ability table. All right, so let's go back to the 2DAs really quick. So that was, and like I said, you'll hear those called the ability tables or the collab, because by tradition, yours don't have to, but by tradition, all the ones that ship with the game start with collab something. So that's the collab table. And then lower mixed help, these are the three, this is like the kit's name in lowercase. This is the kit's name in like properly cased text. And then help is the description that says, the berserker is a warrior that can channel their anger. Here are their advantages. Here are their disadvantages. So if you look at this in code, right, there's the collab, there's your lower mixed and help. And these are says. So these can be strings, right? So this, you can use an at reference. You could use, if you want to reuse an existing string, you could use the number and a reference, or you can just put, the text here directly surrounded by tildes, whatever works for you. All right, lower mix say, and then Lua BBR. This is your table of high level abilities. So if we look at Lua BBR, this is what high level ability table you're going to use. Again, this is, for the most part, kits use the HL table of their parent class. You don't have to, but this would be where you designate it. The other thing is that, unlike kind of everything else that you're doing, the HL tables have to start with LU. So you notice like the mage table, it just says MA0. The actual table is LU MA0. So if you want to see the mage high level ability table, it's here. It's LU MA0. And we'll talk a little about this, because this is another thing like the kit tables, where it determines what you can get, when you can get it, how it works, etc. So we'll just very quickly look at the mage table here, right? So just like the kit table, you can have spells applied or gained. In this case, I happen to know the applied, these are the level 6 spell, the bonus level 6 spell, the bonus level 7 spell, and the bonus level 8. There's also restrictions that you can apply. Like, there's no minimum level for any of these, but this is the level 6. If you want to get the level 7 spell, you need to first take the level 6 spell. To get the level 8 bonus spell, you have to take the level 7s first. So this is how so the prerequisite means you can't get that until you get the prereq. And you'll also see this with stuff like the fire abilities, right? There's Whirlwind, and then there's Greater Whirlwind. You can't access Greater Whirlwind until you take at least one Whirlwind. And then these are the 9th level spells, right? This is stuff like Summon Planetar. In fact, Summon Planetars, here's the alignment restrictions. One of these is Summon Planetars, and the other one Summon the Dark Planetar. The Dark Planetar is limited to, if you're evil, you can't summon Planetars. If you're good, you can't summon Dark Planetars. And once you pick, and the other thing too is once you pick one, it excludes the other, right? So if I'm neutral and I pick the Fallen Planetar, I can't, or the Dark Planetar, I can't get the regular Planetar. So these are how you can kind of restrict things. And then the other thing is number allowed. So for the mages, right, these just go in your spell book. So picking it more than once is just pointless. So you're only allowed to pick one, as opposed to say like the fighter table, right? if you could pick up to 20 greater whirlwinds or 20 hardies or hardiness or 20 whatever. So, and then again, right, you see how we've got prereq set up so you can't take like greater whirlwind without taking whirlwind. So the HL tables by themselves are fairly straightforward. For the most part, kits usually use their parent classes. They don't have to. Oh, one very important thing about HLAs is they are hard-coded to only allow you 24 selections. You cannot have more than 24 HLA selections. The ones that come closest to this is like the Fighter Mage Cleric table and the Fighter Mage Thief table. You'll notice these are almost maxed out. So, if you've got some great expansive idea for your kit in HLA, just keep in mind you can't have more than 24. And that includes like, even if you have stuff that's mutually exclusive or dependent on each other, those will still take up a slot. So just keep that in mind. So that's the HLA table. And like I said, you're perfectly able to just use the parent class's HLA table. And for the most part, that is what most existing kits do. So that's the Lua BBR 25 start weapon. So this is specific to Throne of Bale. If you start a game directly in Throne of Bale, like it's not that you finish Shadows of Valm and you're just moving it to Throne of Bale. If you're starting a new game, right, the game gives you a bunch of goodie bags and a bunch of starting equipment. This is the table that determines what you get, right? So you notice like it gives you like a bag of holding, which contains a bunch of goodies. And then it will give you, rings, cloaks, amulets, ammunition, miscellaneous items, a weapon. This is where you can set custom equipment for your kit when they start Throne of Bale specifically. This is another place where generally classes copy their parent class. You may want to make a few exceptions. Like, for example, if you were like for the archer kit, you may want it to, instead of getting like normal ranger weapons, you may want to give it like more specialized bows and ammo. But for the most part, kits generally follow their parent class in terms of the starting equipment for Throne of Bale. And then what's last? Unusabilities. Okay, so this is another place where kits suck and things can get complicated quickly. So if you look on an item, so let's just pull up like, I don't know, a bastard sword. So unusabilities for items come in two layers. Right. First, you have your alignment restrictions, right? If a weapon can't be used, like the Carsimir can't be used by evil parties, right? So you have your alignment restrictions. And then you have all your class restrictions. And then you have racial restrictions, right? If something is, like the dwarven throwing hammer, right, can only be used by dwarves, you flag of all the other races as unusual. And then on top of that, you'll notice you've got 4 layers of individual kit restrictions. And these aren't used all that much, but they are used. So when you're picking unusability, you're basically saying which one of these 32 flags are going to be applied to my kit. And these essentially stack, right? So if you have like a cleric kit that you want to use swords, they're not going to be able to. Because what happens is if you come to a sword and you tell your kit to either like just use like barbarian flags or none of these at all, it's still going to be blocked up here because your parent class is blocked. Right? So giving your class greater freedom in items, greater freedom than the parent class, is almost impossible. There are a few exceptions and a few tricks you could do, but for the most part, you're not going to be able to do it. On the flip side, if you want to make a fighter class that can't use hammers, right? If you want to restrict your kit beyond what the parent class restricts, that's actually really pretty straightforward. On the EEs, it's almost trivial because the EEs give you basically an opcode that you can apply to any item that you could say, hey, don't, this kit shouldn't be able to use this. So on the EEs, it's trivial. On original Baldur's Gate 2, it's a little harder, but it can be done. But just keep in mind, item usability sucks. So generally, for the unusable value, we can actually go back to this. This is the Ooze Master kit. So this value of the hex value of 4,000 basically means just use the same restrictions as the parent class, right? 4,000 means the parent class. So in this case, the Ooze Master is using the exact same restrictions as just a normal druid would get. Don't apply any extra kit flags. So whereas supposed you can see like Beast Masters get restricted from this item, something like plate mail, right? You'll notice that barbarians can't use it. Stalkers and Beastmasters, Archer, Kinsai, right? Any armor you're going to see Shapeshifter pop up because while druids can wear armor, Shapeshifter can't wear any of it. Avengers are restricted based on, I think it's non-metal, basically non-animal. So like any metal armor, you'll find Avengers here as well. And then Stalkers and Archers and Kinsai. And then you also find on throwing weapons, let's look at bows. You'll see Kinsai and Cavalier pop up. So these are this Kinsai, this is actually, even though fighters could use it, Kinsais cannot because of this second flag. And same thing for Cavaliers, right? Paladins can use this item, but Cavaliers specifically cannot. Inquisitors and Undead Hunters can. So that's what I mean by these things stack, right? You have to have, if you assign an unusability bit to your kit, both of these boxes, basically the parent class and whatever bit you pick, have to be unchecked for the item to actually be usable by the character. So that's why I said it's because of these class checks why it's so obnoxious and almost impossible to get your kit a usability greater than what the parent could use. Like I said, getting a cleric kit to use swords is almost impossible. It's so obnoxious. So kit usability is it's so frustrating because you'll say somebody would I have a great idea for a kit. I want to do this, this, and this. And I'm going to balance it by letting, it's a cleric kit. I'm going to balance it by letting them use bows. And it's well, you were doing so good until you hit that part. So those are you can just use the parent's usability on original Baldur's Gate 2. The only other flexibility you have is, if you wanted a fighter kit, or if you wanted, let's say, a druid kit that can't use armor. Actually, no, druid kit's a bad example. If you wanted a mage kit that can't use armor, you would basically, it's a mage, but then you might give it the shapeshifter bit because shapeshifters can't wear any armor at all. So you basically on OBG2, you have to reuse the unusability scheme of another kit. So on the EEs, it's really nice. You can do this all purely through opcode 319, and we can talk about how to do that as well. But restrictions above the parent class the takeaway is restrictions above the parent class are easy. More freedom than the parent class is almost impossible. So that's basically everything you need for kind of your basic Baldur's Gate 2 kit, right? And you can see this in just this regular ad kit, right? These are all, there's the collab file. Oh, I don't think we covered this. Let's talk about that in a moment. But here's the unusability, right? It's just using 4,000, which means just use the parent class restrictions. 11 is the class. This is a druid kit. DR0, it's just basically using the druid's HLA table. This is the starting weapons for Baldur's Gate 2. And then that's it's dual class. You can duel into fighters. And the alignment restrictions, it's the same as the parent. It needs 17 wisdom, just like the regular druid, to duel out of. It needs 15 to duel into. Or I'm sorry, it needs 15 to duel out of, 17 to duel into. It has no attribute bonuses, and it requires 12 wisdom and 7 charisma. And then I believe, I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure this is the default druid weapon proficiencies. And then these are the alignments. So I think it can be, I'd have to double check, but I think the Ooze Master has to be, so this is like lawful good, lawful neutral, lawful evil. I think it needs to be evil alignment. I'd have to check, but basically, and the first line is its alignments. So yeah. So let's talk about this really quick because I forgot to mention these. Did I skip that line here? I must have. Okay. So these right here, decay. These basically control which races and classes can pick your kit. And the format is, they all start with K. The second letter is for the class. So in this case, this is a kit druid. H is human, D is dwarf, G for gnome, E for elf, HE for half elf, HL for halfling, and HO for half orc. And the middle initial 4 classes also changes. But if you were to look at one of these files, like if we were to look at like the KD, let's just, so this is the kit for Bard for dwarfs. They're allowed, I didn't want to do that. They're allowed kit 0, 13, 14, and 15. And so if we were to look on, discard these changes. If we look at kit list, kit 13, 14 are the Blade, Jester, and Scald. Now, I know you're all thinking like, wait, dwarves can't be bards. They can't. But if they were allowed, this would be the kits that they're allowed to pick. So, for example, I think the only one that you'll see by default on BG2E is you'll notice that we've got 1, 2, 3. These are like the Berserker. These are the normal fighter kits, and then 34 and 31. Da-da-da. So we can look at 1, 2, 3, 34, and 31. So Berserker, Wizard, Slayer, Kinsai, and then Barbarians and the Dwarven Defender. Why is the Dwarven Defender turning up here? That's it. I think the Dwarven Defender might actually be restricted via the UI directly. So these basically limit your kits to selections, right? So all you have to do in add kit is basically list which ones you want it to apply to. Generally, you want it to be all. If you are making a special kit like just for your NPC, you would leave this line blank because it's a kit just for your NPC and you don't want like the player to be able to select it. Then you would leave this line blank. If you want to make a racially restricted kit, like this kit is only for elves, you delete everything except for like the elf and maybe the half elf if you wanted them to have it entries here. And the nice thing is when add kit runs, it'll basically, it'll add your kit. It'll like, okay, here's the number. And then it will do it automatically for you. So these are basically like the racial restrictions for your kit. So that's your basic add kit. Now, add kit X, if we were to look in here, you're going to see a lot of stuff that is not that was not covered by add kit. And you don't have to define all these, right? Anything that you don't define, add kit will just use the value of the parent, right? So if I don't want to designate special class colors, it will just find, and it's a cleric kit, it'll just see what are the colors for a cleric and use those by default. But like you'll see class wep prof. A lot of these are right. These are all exactly the same as the parent. Can you only racial restrict to normal races? Yes, yes. You'll notice that there's no like thiefling entries here. There's no vampire entries here. So it's limited to only the races you can select at character creation. I don't know how, for example, Talents of Faerun, which expands these, how it does it, because Talents of Faerun does it almost entirely through the UI editing. So these are like the hard-coded way it looks up. Like, so I don't know, being as you can't select tieflings at regular character creation, you're also going to have to, it'll depend on the person who makes tieflings available in the UI is also going to have to figure out how to display those kits. And so it's going to be up to whoever makes that UI edit. But these are like the defaults for how the engine does it. So, and like I said, it's entirely possible to make a kit that that normal PCs can't use. For example, Amber, who's a Tiefling rogue, who's an NPC at G3, she uses her own kit to provide like special weapon restrictions just for Amber, but it's a kit just for her, and the PC can't select it, right? And the way that's done is basically this line, this add kit. Oh, here it is kept blank. And here's a good example, right? This is the Sylvan Mystic from Sorcerer's Space Collection. This is an elf or a half-elf kit. Right, if you have a human ranger, you're not given this kit as an option because it's only elf and it's only half-elf. Okay, but we get into... I'm not going to quite go through all of these. I think it may set those itself. All right, so you'll notice, so it's basically the same information stated slightly different. Start weapon is the 25 start weapon. The collab path is the path to your 2DA with the kit table. Kittable is I'd have to look up the documentation. Base class is, what is this a cleric kit? Is this a paladin kit? Is this a bard kit? These are all of the EE specific bonuses, and we can go ahead and take a look through these too. So let's go ahead and do this. All right, so we got class race requirements. This is how you would, okay, that's why Dwarven Defender is not turning up here, because here's where Dwarven Defender is racially restricted. It's a 1 if it's allowed. Dwarven Defenders are only allowed for dwarfs. Everything else is a 0. So this is the other way you can racially restrict classes and kits. So if you want to use class race requirement instead. But again, you'll notice it's only the normal player selectable races up top. There's no tieflings. All right, and then you also have class weapon bonuses. So these are... you can differentiate your kit. This is something that the EE soft coded. So like if you have a mage and you're using a weapon that you're not proficient in, you get a -5 to hit penalty. If you're a fighter and you don't know how to use a weapon, you get a -2 to hit penalty. So you can define your kit to have a different non-proficiency penalty. Right, if you want to make like a very, physically combat oriented mage and give them something less than -5 when they're using a non-proficient weapon, this is how you can do it. Get prof's APR. This is right. So even if you were to give, a mage kit grand mastery in something, they don't get the normal APR bumps that you get at 2 stars and 5 stars. I think it is. This is how you would change that, right? You'll notice fighters, all the warrior classes get that prof's APR. So if you want your mage kit or your bard kit or your druid kit or your whatever kit to get those APR bumps because they're getting, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 stars in a weapon, you would set a 1 here. The unarmed divisor. Does anybody have that set? Okay. So that's a special monk thing. I'd have to look up what this does exactly, but I believe this is... The fact that it's being applied to monks implies to me that this is like their unarmed bonuses somehow. I'd have to look at... Actually, let's just look this up in the ISDP. I'm sure it'll have it explain this for class weapon bonuses. Rather than me just guessing or saying, I don't know. Why don't we learn? All right, so we want to look up 2DA files, and we're looking up class weapon bonuses. Unarmed divisor. Oh, sets the number of attacks unarmed. Okay. So monks get... I think this is half, so I think they get 1.5 APR. Everybody else just gets the default 1. Okay, that's what it is. Yeah. Unarmed divisor sets the number of attacks for unarmed fist characters. 0 means no bonus. Non-zero means the level divided by value. Okay, gotcha. Level divided by value. Okay. So that's the divisor. Okay, suddenly everything makes sense. This is the unarmed divisor. So if this is 0, you basically get 1 attack if you're unarmed. Monks will get their level divided by 3. So level 1, 2, or 3 monk gets 1 attack. Level 4, 5, 6 will get 2 attacks. 7, 8, 9 will get 3, etc. so forth. Actually, I don't know if it rounds up or down. So it might be 1 through 5. Maybe you don't get that second attack until you're level 6. A third attack at level 9, etc., etc. All right. So if you want to make, a fist fighting fighter that gets APR like a monk, you can set that here. Doesn't even have to be at the same rate. You could use a 4 or 5 or whatever. All right, so that's class weapon bonuses. What else do we have? HB class. This is for defining a custom hit point table. This is something we haven't talked about. So by default, there's only like a handful of tables. There's the barbarian table, which is the, you roll D12 until you hit level 10, in which case it's a flat 3. Pretty much all the warriors, rangers, paladins, fighters all use the HP war table, which is the 10-sided die until you hit level 9. If you want to use a custom hit point table, like maybe you want to roll hit dice only through level 5, or you want to have a mage class that rolls a D8. You would define your HP class. You can also define it. You can also choose to use one of the existing tables, right? It doesn't have to be a brand new table, right? If you want to use a mage class that uses the warrior hit point table, you can define that. All right, I keep going back to the wrong thing. Number of weapon slots. Num weapon slot. This determines, like, when you're on the game screen in the lower left corner, or sorry, on the inventory screen, right? You've got your shield, helmet, whatever, and then you have 1 to 4 boxes for weapons. This is what determines how many boxes you get for weapons. So you notice, like, warriors tend to get 4. Everybody else tends to get 2. Rangers get 3, etc., etc. So again, if you don't define this, it'll just use whatever the parent class is using. But if you want to add or subtract weapon slots, you can. Class color, I mentioned this before. These are the default. Oh, it's right here. I keep forgetting that I made it pop up like that. These are the default colors for a class. The main thing that you're going to be worried about here are your main and your minor. And like I said, the main place where this is useful is if You know, let's say you're making like a kit for Edwin, right? You want a red wizard class. Well, red wizards are obviously known for wearing red, so you might define the minor and the main as red, so that when somebody rolls a red wizard kit for themselves, by default it's going to be wearing red. Or alternatively, like if you're making a, you know, like a paladin of a specific deity, you might want the colors to match the deity's colors, right? If you look at Faith's avatars, they'll talk you often about, like, you know, their clergy are well known for wearing red and white, or, you know, the colors of Shar or whatever. So this can be where you define these. If this isn't important, again, it'll just, by default, it'll take the parent class's colors. Next is class I skill. Okay, so this is scaling for thief skills. So this is kind of thief specific, but you will notice there's a few places where other classes will get it. What's the best way to describe this? So the easiest way to think about this is, let's say you wanted to make a thief class, but for whatever reason you didn't want them to set traps. Let's go to some of the thief kits. Did I miss them? Where are my thief kits at? Well, Assassin is there. Let's check this in. Maybe I'm misunderstanding. It's obviously been a while since I've done. Oh, it's just initial scores. Okay, I'm sorry. Never mind. I thought this was the multiplier. I think that's actually the next file. So basically, bards start off with 25 in pickpockets. Okay, this suddenly makes more sense. Rangers start off with 15 and move silently and hide in shadows. Okay. I was misunderstanding. I think I'm thinking of the next file. So this is class initial skill. So for whatever reason you want your thief class to start with 50 and detect illusions, this would be where you would define it. You can also do that via an applied spell, so you don't necessarily have to use this table, but all right. So sorry about that. So and then next up is class Thack. Oh yeah, I'm thinking of thief scale. Okay. I'm going to jump ahead really quick. We'll do thief scale. All right. So here you go. This is basically the multiplier that's applied to thieving points. Stealth is here. Stealth was the original Baldur's Gate. The original Baldur's Gate and original Icewind Dale used stealth, which was a combination of hide in shadows and move silently. It's not really used anymore, but it is included here because Rangers essentially still use it, or used to. So it's included even though stealth isn't really used in the game. But for example, you look at Rangers. Rangers get 100% of move silently and hide in shadows, but no other thief skills. Bards get pickpockets, but they don't get anything else. I'm pretty sure like monks are also going to be here as like 100 in finding traps, and I think illusion too. So if for whatever reason you wanted your thief to only have, you're making a thief kit where they get better melee abilities, but at the cost of like their thieving skills don't go as hard, you can make them scale here. Or if you don't want them to be able to set traps, right? You could set a 0 in traps, and then they're not allowed to put any points into set traps. Or if you don't want them to pick pockets or open locks or whatever it is you want to use as a drawback, this is where you do it. And generally you use 0 or 100 to basically indicate you can or you can't. Very few of these are something in between that actually scales it. This is more of a hit or miss. All right, so thief skill is what I was thinking of in terms of a multiplier. The I skill is the initial value. All right, so, and then I skipped over class Thack. This, I believe, is you get certain bonuses with weapons. Okay. Yeah, so this is if you want your kit to have a better or worse to hit score than the base class, you can set it here. Most classes, because this wasn't available in OBG2, like most of the classes that get like the swashbuckler bonus where they get a +1 to hit, that's actually applied via a spell that's applied via their table. But this is available if you just want to use this instead. So that's class Thack. And then backstab. Backstab is basically the progression of your multiplier. So for example, you see how the assassin bonuses are much higher, right? They jump to 3. And then assassins, in addition to this progression, also get another, I think, +1 via their ability table. So it's not just here that they're getting this, because you'll notice they're pacing thieves, like the normal thieves, but it's because they're also getting another bump to their multiplier via their kit table. And you'll notice stalkers, which aren't a thief kit, but they can backstab, so they're listed here as well. And of course, shadow dancers are 1 below what the normal progression is. So shadow dancer, that could have been done via their kit table, but instead it's being done here. So if you want your kit to have a backstab, you would want to define what their backstab progression is going to be. And this goes out to 40. Let's see. Sneak attack. I think sneak attack is basically the same idea as the backstab table. Yeah, so sneak attack, this is basically the same format as as backstab, except that this is for if the player has sneak attack enabled instead of backstab. It'll use, sneak attack basically replaces backstab, so depending on what the player has picked in their settings, they'll either use sneak attack or backstab. Crippling strike. Same deal. This is something that you can choose instead. So, again, the same format as sneak attacks and backstabs. Thief skill as opposed to scale. This is something that was, I'm so happy this was soft-coded. So this, as you can see, sets up how many points you get at level 1 and then how many points you get at every level up in your thief skills. It used to be that, like in the original engine, if you wanted your kit to only get 15 points per level, you basically had to use the assassin usability flag, which sucked. Because so many of those flags were doing double duties to control the stuff. So if you want your thief to only get, 20 points a level or 30 or some custom value, you can customize it here. Again, otherwise it's just going to copy the base class's value. And you can see this is also where the monks are given their points to assign for what they get, like find traps, I think. Notably absent is our rangers, ranger stealth and bard pickpockets, which are done. Those are done from another table, but this is where you do your custom skill progression. Note that this also doesn't include racial bonuses. Those are also in another 2DA file, but those are not kit specific. Those are determined by your by the parent class. All right, so that was thief skill, and then trap limit. The number of traps that any given class can put on the field at one time. If for whatever reason you want to make a kit that has super powerful traps, but to balance it, they're only allowed to use one at a time, this would be where you can set it. Again, you don't set a custom value for your kit. It just uses the parent's class. And then BD start weapon. So just like... and this is only going to be... Let me jump over to an SOD game. So just like in Throne of Bale, if you start a new Throne of Bale game with a new character, you get goodie bags and starting equipment. If you start a Siege of Dragonspear game directly without playing Baldur's Gate, you will also get goodie bags. So it's the exact same idea and format as 25 start weapon, except that this is going to be, 25 start weapon is for you want equipment appropriate for starting Throne of Bale. This instead you would want equipment appropriate for starting Siege of Dragonsphere. So the levels are going to be vastly different, right? You shouldn't be giving out any +4 swords in BD start weapon, but same idea. In fact, it's the exact same format, including Siege doesn't really give out goodie bags, but if you wanted to give out a goodie bag, you could. Otherwise, it's just some basic items. And that's pretty much it. So like I said, all of these are specific to EEs. And so a lot of these simply do not have equivalents on the original, right? There's no way to define custom colors on original Baldur's Gate. There's no way to enable or disable very, very specific, right? If you just want to take away one thief skill from a kit, you can't really do that on the originals. If you want to impose like a custom hit point table, you can't do that on the originals. So these are, when people talk about how like you can do more stuff on the E's, this is the first part of the puzzle. The expanded number of opcodes and scripting options also make even more stuff possible, but this is kind of your first line of how doing a kit specifically for the EEs is better and you have more flexibility. So we'll talk more about that as we kind of go through and start building a kit. So, but for now, we're already an hour into it. Let's go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we're going to set up a very basic kit. So if you guys have a kit that you want to pitch, and I'm thinking more in terms of not so much like I don't need like a history, but if you have an idea, like let's do, a melee oriented sorcerer, or, I want a trap specialist thief or something like that. If you've got an idea for advantages and disadvantages, go ahead and put it in chat and we'll try that. If not, we'll just kind of wing it and go from there. But let's take a quick break and we'll come back in a couple of minutes and then get going on building an actual kit. So, all right, sit tight, everyone. We'll be back in a little bit. me move the mic in. Welcome back. So I'm looking through the chat right now. So it's the increments one. It's possible to create a kind of god class that can learn to cast spells, learns cleric and druid spells for level, and turns undead. Has all thief abilities, also gets points to spend for level, and receives all HLAs. Some of that is possible, some of that is not. As I mentioned, HLAs are limited to... The tables are hard limited to 24 entries. So all HLAs is definitely out. Now you could just give them, you could just make it so that when they reach the ability to cast level 9 spells, you just give them all of the, mage level 9 HLA spells. And when they reach cleric level 7, they get all of the cleric HLA spells like Storm of Vengeance. So there's some workarounds to some of that, but for the most part, no. You're still limited to existing classes, right? So you would probably start with something like, oh, and I should have mentioned this. On the EEs, you can make kits for multi-classes. I know Subtle Doctor has done a lot of work on this, and a couple other folks as well, that you can make kits specific for like a fighter mage. So yeah. So you'd start with something like a fighter mage cleric and then do some stuff. But the problem is that you'd also need some UI editing too. Because if you look at something like even like a cleric thief, I think the thieving button gets pushed off onto the second panel because turn undead takes the middle button. So you'd need some UI editing to also get all of the right buttons to appear. So the short answer is not really. The long answer is you could probably do some of it, but not really. Because that's the thing, right? I mean, really to open up the thief abilities, you probably really need something that's thief-based. But if you also want cleric casting, then you probably want a fighter mage cleric as a base instead of a fighter mage thief. I mean, your other option is to just make it a fighter mage thief, but then via the collab, give them all the cleric spells and have them just cast cleric spells as mage spells. And then just, I don't know, maybe give them a bunch of bonus spells to make it happen. So it's, I mean, kind of, but not really. The other thing is there's no limitation on innate abilities, so you could also turn like every mage or every cleric spell into an innate ability and give them abilities there. So it's one of those things where it's like not really. There are, as much as the EE soft coded a lot of stuff, there's still quite a bit of hard coded stuff that's going on, especially with the UI, like adding buttons to support all the abilities that you would want to try to shove into one kit is a little bit of a pain in the ass to put it nicely. The nice thing is expanding spellbooks is actually fairly easy, right? When you think about something like is it Avenger Druids who get all of the bonus spells? Yeah, Avenger Druids. Yeah, let's see. Avengers are I think they're known as Beast Friends internally. Yeah, so Avengers basically get some mage spells, and that's what these are, these SPDRs. And what these are, if you would actually look, let's go ahead and take a look at one of these SPDRs. This is basically a copy of Chromatic Orb that has been changed to be a divine spell. Because if you left it as a mage spell, it would show up on their mage screen, and they don't have access to that. So you turn it into a priest spell, but then otherwise this is just a straight up copy of Chromatic Orb. Yeah, there's been Psionics has been, I feel like Psionics has been like a holy grail. There have been multiple attempts of like, here's my take on doing Psionics. And
I've not had a chance to play around with Subtle Doctor Psionics mods yet, but I do know it's one of those things where the engine can kind of sort of do it. And so every attempt that I've seen so far, usually there's some trade-off to making it work. And it's just a matter of trying to minimize the downside of whatever trade-offs you have to do. It can definitely be done, but it's just the game's just really not set up to do psionics. I mean, to put it frankly. So I have no doubt the Subtle Doctor probably did it probably about as good as it can be done, but just the engine is really not set up for psionics. So, but like expanding, like if you have an existing spellcaster class like a mage or a cleric and you want to give them spells beyond what they get normally, you can just put them straight in their spell book. Like if you wanted a cleric to get spells that are normally only for druids, you could just put in their collab in the kit table to just give them whatever spells you think they should have. Now, if they're, for like Avengers, where you do need to change the spell type, then you just make a copy of that spell with the new spell type and then give them the copy. But the idea is the same, right? Having a spellcaster with a broader than usual spell book is fairly easy. So like what Zen Black is pitching, like the Storm Sorcerers, where you give them certain spells for free. That's essentially what what Shaman do, right? Shaman basically get they're the divine version of a sorcerer. They get the divine spell selections, but then they also get like those special spells, the 50 series. So shamans get like Spirit Ward just added to their spellbook for free. They get Writhing Fog. They get, so these are all the 50s. They get Spiritual Clarity. They get Spirit Fire. These are basically added to their spellbook by their collab. I think shamans are collab SH. Yeah. So you notice they're just gain. Right? And so these are just dropped directly into their spellbook. So they don't have to pay one of their spell slot selections on these spells. They're just given to them automatically. So yeah, so expanding spellbooks is not that hard. So like that part of Incrementus questions, like if you want to learn cleric and druid spells, you can just take a base cleric and then do like a gain SPPR and then whatever the codes for all the druid spells if you wanted them to be able to cast both. Because how the engine usually works for divine spells, if you look at any spell named SPPR and then 1 to 7 and then 0, 1 to 50 gets checked to see if the divine spellcaster gets to learn it. So something like Bless has no restrictions, so everybody gets Bless. But something like Entangle, clerics and paladins don't get it, druids get it. And some of these also have, like when we get down to like Holy Smite and Unholy Blight, you'll also see there's alignment restrictions. So basically, the first time I level up and I gain access to level 1, the engine checks all of the SPPR 1s. And as long as like I'm not excluded by one of these flags, it gets added to my spellbook automatically. These can be restricted. There's a 2DA file called Hide Spell that you can, like if you don't want Entangle to be checked, you would basically add its entry to Hide Spell. Because there are a few spells that get hidden that way. Like Fairy Fire is used only by enemies. So this is actually in Hide Spell to make sure that like PC clerics and PC druids don't get access to it. But expanding a spellbook, like I said, expanding a spellbook is easy. You can use the existing collab to do it. So yeah. So the other thing about second edition PNP, I always make jokes about this, but it's so frustrating because second edition you have like, you've got your player's handbook and you've got your Dungeon Master's Guide, right? But 2E especially, and then like there's a whole bunch of, there'll be campaigns and all sorts of other source material that came out. But 2E especially was notorious for having like special rules. Here's an idea for Psionics that appeared like in an appendix of Dragon magazine, and that probably happened 7 or 8 times. So depending on which Psionics book and rules you've read, there's probably multiple schemes to do Psionics. The main thing I just remember about it was you needed to have like super high stats, and then also you had to make some other rolls at character creation to even get access to them. But it's been so long since I've thought about or done Psionics that, because then the other thing is like Psionic combat is also another whole other thing, and especially given how many mind flayers are around BG2. Yeah, it becomes a little silly pretty quickly, because again there's so many. Again, this was years ago, but I just remember there being a lot of competing schemes of Psionics and how to do them. So all right. So, but I think, Psionic. So no on the Psionics. But I think, we can use something like Zen Black's idea of a storm sorcerer. But instead of, and I think this is more or less just going to be as an example, but let's do something like a sorcerer that not just lightning based stuff, but we'll get the occasional druid spell or cleric spell to mix it up, but on an elemental basis. So I'm thinking things like Call Lightning's an obvious one. Summon Insects would be absolutely busted on a sorcerer, so no. But Call Lightning, I'm trying to think of something for like every level. They could do like Magic Stone, Alicorn Lance, if we include Icewind Dale stuff. Call Lightning, what's a level 4 cleric spell? Thorn Spray? Poison could be it. Cone of Cold. Well, but that's the, as a sorcerer, they already have access to Cone of Cold. I mean, we can give it to them for free, sure. But I'd like to do something that sorcerers don't usually get. So that's why, level 5 could be Flame Strike. Level 6 could be Fire Seeds. That's another fire, though. Searing Orb. Level 7 could be Sunray, although that's another. There's a lot of fire spells. All right, but just as an idea, right? I mean, at the very least, this will give us a starting point so that we could. The main thing is I want to kind of go through the Waidu part of making a kit. The kit itself actually not that important, but I do want to kind of go through the basics of making a kit. So just like the very first day, we're going to start off making a Waidu kit from scratch. So let's think. We're just gonna name something simple. We're gonna do CD kit. We need a TP2. So we need CD kit TP2, and then I know I'm gonna need it. I'm gonna go ahead and make a lib folder now. Okay, and let me grab. Since I know I'm gonna need it, I'm gonna go ahead and save this as. Do I tweak testing into the compat folder, cd kit lib? Oh, why is it saving this as like? No, we want this to be add kit x.tph. Okay, make sure that showed up, and it is what I think it is. Oh no, it saved the wrong thing. That's not what I wanted. This was the temporary scripting we did yesterday, so I was saving the wrong file. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and actually hold on. Let me reopen that. because I'm going to use this as a, we're going to copy and paste this as a starting point. All right, so let's go into here. All right, I'm sorry. Let's try opening the correct thing. Let's open up the TP2. All right, so what do we start off with? We already start off with a backup. This is going to be, we're going to back up to WeDo external /cd kit /backup. Support, I'm going to leave blank for now. And then what else do we need? We got our backup, we got our support. Let's put in a version alpha 1. And then I think I don't need an always block. I'm not going to set up, well, I will set up a language block. Language block, English, except this is going to be CD kit, lang, English, WeDo, yep, blah, blah, blah. And then let's start our first component. And then let's see, I'm also going to need a lang. Inside lang, we're going to need an English. Let's just do in US. And then I'm going to go ahead and make 2 tray files because I know I'm going to need them. Do WeDo.tray and then game.tray. So again, this is how I set up my tray files. WeDo is going to be strings that are used exclusively to the installer, and then game is going to be for strings exclusively to the that are going to go actually into the game. So like the name of the kit, the things like that. WeDo.tray is going to be things like, do you want to install this kit? Those sort of things. So I'm going to reserve strings 0 to 1000 for my WeDo, 0 to 999 for WeDo, and then game is going to start at 1000. All right, so come back to our TP2. We're going to begin at 0, component 0. This is going to be CD, and then we're going to label it CD kit. I'm just going to leave it generic and say sorcerer elemental. Now, in a way, this simplifies things because original BG2 doesn't support kitting sorcerers. So already we know out of the gate this is going to be an EE only kit. So that, in some ways, that simplifies things. We don't have to make compromises for Baldur's Gate 2. So as of right now, we have a working mod. So, and then support, I think, should be, yeah, we'll use the miscellaneous release mods. I'm not actually going to release this. This is going to be purely for internal development. All right, and then let's also add game. So by default, it's going to load both of these tray files. So any strings we need, we can just drop into the 2 of them, and we know they're going to be available because the language block is loading them. So let's just grab. Let's just grab this as a starting point. Okay. So first off, we need the class. The class is going to be, let's go to our good old class IDS. I believe sorcerers are 20. No, they're 19. So our class is going to be 19. The mixed lower and help. Oh, you know what? I have the name here, and I forgot to make that string. So at 0 is going to be install elemental sorcerer. Okay. And then the game streams, we're going to need a lower, a mixed, and a help. This is going to be 1000. This is just 1000. This is going to be the elemental sorcerer, except lowercase. 1001. This is the mixed case, so we want to keep those capitals. And then 1002 is going to be the, for right now, I'm just going to make this a placeholder kit description. So that is our lower. We made 1000. Our mixed is 1001, sorry. And our help is 1002. So those are the strings for our kit. The kit name, this is the internal name of the kit. This never gets shown to the player, so you want to prefix this with your personal prefix. So this is going to be CD, let's do LMSO as the name of the kit. Unusable, I don't see this having any special restrictions above and beyond a normal sorcerer, so we're just going to use 4000. This is basically 4000 basically means true class, so that it's going to have the exact same restrictions as a normal sorcerer. Class Wep, again, this is going to be something where we don't want to differentiate from the base class, so we can just look up what the existing value for a sorcerer is and use that. Class Wep. Where is our sorcerer? I think it's down here towards the bottom. Or maybe it's not listed at all. All right, well, it's identical to a mage, so we can just do this. Let's grab the value for a mage. So that's our class Wep. And the spacing here doesn't matter. Spacing in 2DA files, you know, whether it's one space or two, just as long as there's white space between the figures. If it's crowded together, it'll make the columns not line up, but you can always, if that bothers you, you can always just use pretty print 2DA to make them look nice. But I don't worry too much about that. The weapon proficiencies, okay. This is going to be a pain in the butt because I can't just copy and paste this from because it's a column instead of a. All right, where is my sorcerer? You know, I think sorcerers may not have columns normally. Do I need a copy for mages again? I think I do. Okay. So I'm actually going to put this in the other window, and then I'm just going to read from it. So we've got 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, then a 1. Another 6 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 zeros. And then a 1. And then 0, 0, 0, 1, and 1. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Then another 13. All right. And the good news is if I've missed a column, when we try to install this, Wido will immediately be like, hey, you've missed one. Okay, so let's see. Next up, we got the dual class, the class requirements and the dual class requirements. So we're back to our AB. Sorcerers actually don't have any requirements, do they? I don't think they do. Oh, okay. Sorry. 9 int, 9 charisma. All right. And then AB class mod. They shouldn't have any bonuses. Yep, all zeros. Then the dual class requirements. These should just be more or less blank. Yes, you can tell sorcerers are kind of a late add because they're not necessarily in every one of these. Dragon Disciples are a sorcerer kit. We can just use their values. I mean, again, you can't dual class into or out of a sorcerer, so these are kind of pointless, but I'd rather put in valid values than skip them. And actually, you know what? I realized I left a negative in there. No, you know what? I'm going to... Because they require int and charisma, I'm going to use those as the requirements. So 0, 0, 0. And then this is for dual classing away from. So 17, 0, and 17. And then do the same for dueling out of, except make those 15s. Again, this is pointless because you can't duel into or out of a sorcerer kit, but... And then alignment, there should be no restrictions. All right. If sorcerers are even listed here, which they're probably not. Oh, they are. Yep, all ones. Okay. So, alignment. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. There's our 9 alignments. Dual classes, all zeros. You should be able to duel in or out of these. I think sorcerers use the mage HLA table. Do they even have a unique listing? They do. Yeah, they use mage 0, which is just the default. And then their starting weapons. Oh, I need to jump back into Baldur's Gate 2. And then let's see. Again, are sorcerers even listed here? Normally they're listed after the mage kits, if they're listed at all. I don't think they are, so we can just give them... I don't know if you guys I can hear this through my headphones. One of the neighbors is chainsawing stuff. I hope that's not coming through on the feed. Because they are chainsawing something. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm grabbing the mage column. So we're just going to go star, 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 bag 29, ring 06, ring 40, star, boot 01, amulet 21, brace 15, belt 10, arrow 11, combo 40. This is ammo. Bull 03, combo 40. Up, bolt 06, combo 40. Potion 52, combo 5. Up. Potion 04, comma 2. Potion 14, comma 5. Sling 05. Dagger 05, comma 20. And staff 20. And then the path is going to be CD kit 2DA, and this is going to be the collab table, which is going to be where we're going to be doing most of our work. And then the kit table, these, let me bring this back. This is going to be, okay, good, no chainsaw. Okay, that must be happening. I think sorcerers are SO, or are they just S's? They're just S. SH is shaman. Okay. I don't see any racial restrictions for this, so we'll just do KS, and then it's what? DEGH. D. E. G H, and then also half elf, halflings, and half orcs. All right, that should be all 7, right? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep. All right. Yeah, no racial restrictions, and then we want to return. So this return value, basically, if you have an NPC that needs to be kitted, or if you need to use that value for item restrictions, there are a number of cases where you might need the kit ID. So you want to, this basically says, I want you to set the variable named CD LMSO as to wherever this gets slotted into the kit table. I want you to return that value as this variable, so that I can then turn around and use that variable elsewhere if I wanted to. So let's take a look at any of the EE specific variables here. Do we want to set? Where's my... All right, here's the base function. So these are all the EE specific. Do we want to give it anything special for BD start weapon? I'm perfectly content with it capturing, reusing the sorcerer stuff. Trap limit, thief skill, crippless strike. These are all thief specific stuff that we don't care about. It shouldn't get any to hit bonuses. We don't have anything specific for coloring. This is another thief skill, number weapon class, and HP class. I'm perfectly content with the hit points being the same as a regular sorcerer, and same, no racial restrictions and no bonuses for weapons. So all the EE stuff, we're not going to take advantage of any of it. It could just copy the basic sorcerer values for all of these, because we're not differentiating our kit in that way. So that should be it. The one thing we do need to go ahead and make this 2DA table. So let's start off with, let's copy the existing sorcerer table as, oh, this is the Dragon Disciple table, but we could still use this as a starting point. So let's export this into CD kit, and I need a 2DA folder, and this is instead going to be cdlmso.tda. So now the first thing is we want to blank all of these existing. I'm sorry, not here. We want to do it in our mod folder. Okay, so what we're going to do is anything that is GA or AP underscore, and these are all SPDD somethings, yeah, SPDD 0 bracket 0 to 9. Let's see, bracket. Let's see. Invalid regular expression. What am I missing up here? Oh, because I've got these in reverse order. There we go. Okay, I cleared all the entries. So we've got a generic table with absolutely nothing in it. It goes out to 50. So we're starting off with a blank slate. So let's go ahead and save this. Like I said, you don't need all these ability rows. You can always trim off the ones you don't need. And we can add more if we need. Like I said, if you look at something like the monk table, the monk tables are insane because at level 14 they get like a bunch of, I forget what ability, but they get like 14 copies of a spell, which is just a little silly. So, but and then like the collab, I should have just used the collab fighter table because I think it is by default it's just empty. Because fighters don't get any special abilities or anything at any level. So, all right, well, whatever. So, first, let's do a little bit of a sanity check. Let us first make sure that we have not... Oh, and I almost forgot. This is an external function, so we need to include the library with this. /lib. And what did I name that file? Named it at. Okay, so just as a sanity check, let's make sure that this installs. So we're gonna go setup. Oh, first I don't have a setup program, so we're gonna copy any setup program to setup cdkit.exe. All right, now I want to set up cdkit. Undefined string. Did I not save this? Oh, okay. Because instead of English, I decided to use id US. So these paths are invalid. That's why I can't find the strings. All right, let's try that again. There we go. Install elemental sorcerer. Let's say yes. We have an error. Are you going to give me no translation provided for at 102? Did I not save game? Oh, because these are... Have I been modifying the wrong file? I have been. Well, the good news is everything I need is here. God damn it. This is still all the Sylvan Mystic. And you, before I overwrite something, let's reload you from disk. Oh, I had already saved that. Okay, well, the good news is, thank God for GitHub. So let's go to, Infinity Matchbox Machine, SP. This is a handy trick when you screw up something locally you don't want to. Want to tortoise git, we want to revert it. I'll go back to the last commit. And then this should say, yes, that's changed. Or this is back to being the Sylvan Mystic. Okay. That whole time I was updating the kit from Sorcerer Replace instead of this. Okay. I noticed this is wrong though, because sorcerers are 19. I think the rest of this is... Yes, the rest of this is fine. Okay, and then we're going to do also as a check, we're going to say, if it works, kit is installed as, just to see if we get feedback. All right, let's try this again. Added CML's kit, and then there's my print feedback. It was installed as kit number 42. All right, so let's take a quick look. So the kit is installed. It doesn't actually do anything right now, but if we go to kit list, there it is. It's using 106.281 as its lowercase. There's its kit description, and then its mixed case is the elemental sorcerer. It's using the CD LMSO as its ability table. It's using column 63 of the weapon proficiency table. Unusable is 4,000, which is just the base kit. 19, so this is a sorcerer kit. You notice just like the Dragon Disciple. And then the kit IDS, 2A is 42 in hex. Because this is what I would, like if I wanted to assign this kit to a creature, I would need this value. Or if I wanted to use a scripting command like add kit, that would also require the kit IDS value. So this isn't quite as important, but it's good to know because you might want to use that for other stuff. So as of right now, we have a sorcerer kit in the game. Like I said, it doesn't do anything beyond a regular sorcerer right now, but I'm pretty sure that we can... Single player, new game. We'll go elf. Elf's going to be sorcerers, right? Yep, sorcerer. There's our elemental sorcerer. Blank kit description, but there we go. It could be any alignment. The only minimums we have are intelligence and on charisma. Everything else can go down as low as we want. And the skills, dagger, quarter staff, darts, and slings. Perfect. We can't put more than 1 point in any of these, right? Yep. Yep, so just like a regular sorcerer. And then we get kicked right into the sorcerer spell selection. So again, we have a working sorcerer kit. Doesn't do anything, but it's working, and it's a starting point. So if we were to look through, so we named it internally CDLM, so we can take a look and see these are all the files that Waidu modified for us. So that's the nice thing about like Waidu's add kit and Argent's add kit X is that I don't have to go into, 20 different 2DA files and make individual edits. You basically define a bunch of strings and then turn either add kit or add kit X loose, and it does all the stuff for you. It handles whether you need to do a row or a column, it handles it for you. So that's what's really, really nice about it. So, and like I said, the places where, like, we didn't give it a specific, like, hit point table. So I basically said, all right, fine. What does the parent class use? We'll use that. So everywhere where, and same for like class color. It's here. We didn't specify any special colors. So those are the sorcerer colors. So you could get as, specific or unspecific as you want to be with a lot of these values. We're 2 hours in, so let's go ahead and take another quick break, and when we come back, we'll actually start doing something to actually make this sorcerer kit actually special and different. And that's going to be primarily through editing its collab through its kit table. So, but as of right now, like you see, we have a working sorcerer kit. Doesn't do anything, but it's up and it's working, and we can look at it in game. So let's take a quick break. We'll come back in a couple of minutes, and we'll see if we can make the sorcerer actually do something different and unusual, hopefully. So sit tight, everybody. We'll be back.
All right, welcome back, everyone. So I was thinking during the break that we're going to be making some divine spells available as arcane spells so that the sorcerer can use them. So I'm going to grab, thankfully I already have a function that does this. This is my bulk spell cloner. So I'm going to grab these. We're going to bring these into our mod folder. We're working on the combat folder. We're working on CD kit. So I'm just going to bring these over really quick. So the nice thing is these were functions I wrote ages ago. Originally, the original version of this, written way back in ancient times, was basically a macro that would turn like an existing spell into an innate, and then just kind of as things grew and got more complicated, these now will basically clone any spell into an innate. It can make it at will. It can change a mage spell into a divine into an arcane, either of those into an innate. And I use these things like friggin' everywhere. So the good thing is we already have these and they're good to go. So basically all we need to do is basically be like, this is the spell we want to start with. This is what we want it to end up with. And they're really, really easy to use. So in fact, I use them. They're being used right here to make, for the Sylvan Misket, like I'm making innate versions of Iron Skins and Chaotic Command. So I'm going to grab this just because that will give us our formatting. We don't need the print feedback anymore, because what I want to do is at every level, let's find a divine spell that we want to convert to an arcane. We don't want to make innate. We want to, we want to make them arcane, not innate. And we'll name them something like CDLM S. And we'll do 1 through 9. Let's try to grab one spell for every level. And then because of this, we also need to include the functionality. So this is going to be, sorry, not this folder, this folder. And it's done in 2 parts, right? Because what it does is, let's say that we clone, I don't know, Flame Strike. What it does is first it'll take Flame Strike and it'll copy it to, in this case, an arcane version of Flame Strike. And then, you make as many, you can do that with as many spells as you need a copy of. Then you run the second half of it, and the second half of it basically goes through every spell, item, and creature in the game. And basically says, if you find something that like is immune to Flame Strike, also make sure that it blocks the new copy that we just created. So that's why it's done in 2 stages. You'll notice we have 2 libraries here. We've got first and last. You basically include the first. This is the bit that clones the spell. And then after you've done all your cloning, you include the last. And this is what goes through and searches all the other spells for references to all the things that you just copied, and make sure that they now have protections or reflections or whatever for the new copies of those spells. Excuse me. So that's why it's done in 2 sections like this. So really simple. Let's just start looking through, spells we're going to use. Like level 1, let's do Magical Stone, because there's nothing really elemental here, unfortunately. This would be something where if I was spending more time, I might actually just make something, or, look through like faiths and avatars. But this is just to learn how to do stuff. So the spell selection is going to be crappy, and we're just going to use existing spells just to demonstrate. So we're going to use Magical Stone. So it's SPPR 106. We want it to be CMLMS1. This is going to be Magical Stone. So let's try to do 9 of these. And it doesn't have to be the exact level, but that's the goal. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And like at 9, like we could even grab like Storm of Vengeance as LM9. Oh, and then one other thing, we also want because this is only for enhanced edition games, we want to require that the game is BGEE, BG2EE, or Icewind Dale EE, or EET. Not Planescape, obviously. And then we want to display an error message, which is going to be at 1, which is this kit requires the enhanced edition. Oh, get back here. Version of the game. Actually, I guess I should say an enhanced edition version of the game. Okay, so now if they try to install this on original Baldur's Gate 2, it'll stop and give them this message instead. Okay, so let's go back to our spell selection. So at level 2, let's grab Flame Blade as an option. Yeah, let's do Flame Blade. So we're continuing with our 06s. That's a 206. All right, level 3, what do we got? Call Lightning is the winner. Yep, Call Lightning, 302. To level 4. Poison, I think. Yeah, we'll do Poison, 411. Like I said, I know this is really low effort, but being as this is more about teaching today than anything else, I think Flame Strike is our winner here at level 5. We'll do Flame Strike, 503. Level 6, what do we got? Blade Barrier might be Fire Seeds. Bolt of Glory is magical damage, so it's not really elemental. So Soul Searing Orb or Fire Seeds. Let's do Souls. We'll do Soul Searing Orb at 614. All right, now level 7. Do we even have 3 options that we can stretch out? We got Conjure Earth. We've got Firestorm. If we include the HLAs, we've also got Storm of Vengeance. So let's do... Yeah, you know what? Let's do Firestorm as level 7, Storm of Vengeance as level 8, and then not do anything for level 9, because at that level, sorcerers already have a bunch of options. So again, we're going to do... Where is it? Firestorm 705. 705, and then Storm of Vengeance 722. We're not going to do a level 9. And then also because Storm of Vengeance is actually a level 7 spell, we need to change its level. So we also need it's going from level 7 to, we want to make the new level a level 8. Because if I remember right, that also will go into its... it does 2 things. You want to make sure it's on the right level, because otherwise it would show up in the level 7 spells for a sorcerer. But I think it also updates its description. The other thing we want to do is, because this kit is potentially... could potentially be used on Baldur's Gate EE, I don't think the HLA spells are available there. So we're going to add a little quick check. We're going to make sure a file exists. We don't want it to try and clone SPPR 722 unless it's actually in the game. So basically only do this. Actually, because I forgot. So only try to clone it if it's in the game. If it's not, then skip this step. Okay, and then once all the cloning is done, we want to execute the last. So let's take an intermediate install, make sure that we get all of these new spells. And I'm going to just change this to language 0 and force install so that I don't have to keep answering prompts. That looks like it works. Let's refresh the tree and see if we've got new spells. I named them CD LM. So yeah, we've got Magical Stone is 1, Flame Blade, Calling Lightning, Poison, Flame Strike, Storm of Vengeance is... Okay, the level is listed as Quest, but internally it's listed as level 8. So this will show up next to other level. This will show up like next to like Horrid Wilting for a sorcerer on the same level because it's now an 8. But you'll notice nothing else has changed. It's still using the Storm of Vengeance BAMs and everything else. Okay. So we've added these spells, but we've not given them to our sorcerers specifically. So really quick, let's take a look at, because I know it's slightly different than mages, the sorcerer spell table. So they get level 1 spells at 1, level 2 spells at level 4, and then it's pretty much every 2, or no, that's a 3-level jump. So basically, I'm looking for the first level where they get level 1 spells, the first level where they get level 2 spells, because that's going to be where we add these to their table. So I'm going to close this window because I keep opening that one. I don't need it. So let's go to our 2DA file. So level 1, they're going to gain, because this is something that's being added to their spell book. They're going to get CD LM so 1 or S1 CD LM S1 at level 1, and then out at level 4 they're going to get the level 2 spells. And then let's see, 6, 8, and 10 for the next ones. So 6. And I'm being really anal retentive and keeping the columns lined up. You don't have to. 10, and then level 6 we got 12, 14, 16 for the next ones. And 16. All right, so that means that we should basically have a sorcerer that gets these bonus spells as they get access to new spells. So let's install once again. That'll get this new and improved table in, and then let's just go into the game and create a sorcerer. Sorcerer, elemental sorcerer, alignment, okay, good. Let's just max the stats because why not? And then, okay, while we're here, one of the things you always hear, you know, for people playing the game is what are the best selections, spell selections for sorcerers? So let's go ahead and answer that question straight off while we're doing this, just as a one-off. So obviously, Infravision is number 1. Obviously. Now, even though you only cast it once the entire game, find familiar. Then what else do we have here? Protect from evil, massive. Burning Hands. There's nothing better than getting your sorcerer into melee range. Nothing better.
And then let's say Chill Touch. Those are your top level 1 spells for a sorcerer. Don't at me. And then we'll just take the defaults for the rest. Because I don't want to... It's going to take too long to go through all of that. Alright. So this would be... Remember how I said you can set default colors? If we had set default colors for our sorcerer, they would have shown up here. And then we'll just use the default female one. And then we'll name it Test. And go into the game. And now we get to check our spell book and see if those spells are there. Oh, not wizard. So level 1, notice we've got Magical Stone. We've got Flame Blade. We had Call Lightning. Poison. Yeah, so all of our spells are here. Flame Strike. On 6, Soul Searing. 7, we've got Firestorm. 8, we'll have Storm of Vengeance. And we didn't add anything for 9, and she can't cast anything for 9 yet. So sure enough, let's fire up the OP-ness. There we go. Alright, but yeah, like a level 1, she's got Magical Stone. Oh, I need a target for that. Well, let's just spawn ourselves an orc. There we go. Look at that vicious 3 magic damage. Look at that. I've got Boots of Speed. Good luck, sucker. Alright, what can we try next? What are some of the other spells we added? Well, let's just go straight to Storm of Vengeance. Man, this has got a long cast time. Yep. Got him. I didn't realize this is like practically like a half-orc barbarian sound set for our sorcerer. That is a very non-sorcerer sound set. So, all right. So you see, we've got our sorcerer. She gets her bonus spells. You know, they show up because we're doing a gain instead of an apply. They show up here as extras, and the nice thing is, you know, they're using the existing spell descriptions show up here just like they would, including Storm of Vengeance. The only weird thing, if I were doing this properly, I would actually change this so this says level 8 instead of level quest. But that's, you know, that's a very minor quibble I have with it. So it's working. You can see our collab is applying stuff like it's supposed to. Now, they're obvious. This isn't a real kit. We haven't put in a ton of effort to actually make this a real kit. One of the hardest things about kits is trying to find the balance between your advantages and disadvantages. Now, right now, this kit has only advantages, right? We're giving it basically 8 spells to broaden its spell selection without any disadvantages whatsoever. And there are 2 schools of thought about disadvantages, right? And personally, I find both of them valid. One is to try and make the advantages match the disadvantages in terms of balance, right? So this sorcerer has an enhanced spell selection, right? So you would want to make a disadvantage that equals that, right? You could, you know, rather than that, you could make the trade-off so that they get, you know, instead of being able to cast 5 level 1 spells before resting, maybe you reduce that to 4. Maybe you give them, I don't know, charisma penalty. Maybe you decrease their casting speed. You know, there are any number of things, and like trying to figure out what you consider, you know, how advantageous is this advantage that I need to apply a disadvantage that matches it. There's no easy, straightforward answer for that, right? And with the other thing you got to think about too is the other school of thought is that you should make any kit that you make should be mechanically fun to play, and the balance should be secondary to that, right? I mean, having a sorcerer with an expanded spell selection is fun, right? So you don't want your disadvantage to take away from that fun. So, if you make, right, so like we've given this sorcerer this expanded spell selection, but we're gonna to compensate, we're gonna reduce moving speed by like 2 or something. The sorcerer is gonna move around like 20% slower. That sucks, right? I mean, one of the first thing everybody wants to do in the game is get boots of speed for everybody in the party, because especially in the original game, walking around those big maps kind of sucks. So, and like I said, there's no right or wrong answer, right? You could ask 100 different players, this is what I want to give my kit. What do you think is a way to balance that? You're going to get 100 different answers. And even if you find an answer that you think is very right for you, and that even 80 of 100 of those players could say, yeah, I think that's a good trade-off for this, it's still going to depend on playstyle, right? I mean, if the initial idea of instead of you get to cast 5 level 1 spells and you reduce it to 4, well, if you're the type of player that plays hardcore Iron Man and you're resting after every fight regardless, that reduced casting isn't a disadvantage, because it's very rare that you're going to that you exhaust your sorcerer spellbook before you rest anyway, right? So even if you find a balance point that works for most players, there's still going to be players that, because their playing style, either that amplifies the advantages you've given a kit or it negates disadvantages. So there's no objectively this is the correct way to balance or create or philosophy to approach your kit making. I hate balance discussions, because especially now 25 years in, there's really kind of 2 schools of thought about the game, right? There are still, I would say that the smaller group are the people who are still playing it for the story, right? These are the type of people who like to play with NPC mods or new quest mods, not because of new tactical challenges, but because they want to enjoy, say, the writing that people have added. And then you have the group that are playing this because they find the tactical challenge of the game, right? These are your no reload, ascension, improved battles, SCS, no reload, insane difficulty, or legacy of Bale difficulty, players. And the wants and needs of those 2 groups and what they're looking for in a kit are very, very different, and you can't necessarily reconcile them. So I would say, if you're making kits, know ahead of time kind of what you're going for, right? If you're aiming for the tactical players, your disadvantages, you're gonna have to really dial those in against your advantages, right? If you're making a kit that, what's the holy grail of a melee character, right? Damage resistance and APR. So if you're handing those out as perks or disadvantages, you need to really, really think about it, because those 2 things really affect people who play the game for its tacticalness. Now, if you're instead aiming at the players that are still trying to role play, then, handing out damage resistance and APR probably doesn't matter, because they're not playing with something like SCS where you need to maximize your combat efficiency in every fight. So there's not, I kind of saved this towards the end, because there's no answer to this. There really isn't. And even if you And again, even if you answer it for yourself, that's not going to be the answer for other players. So, balance it the best you can and be open to feedback, because your play style may be different than everybody else's too, right? You may think oh, this is perfectly balanced for how I play, and everybody else is yeah, nobody else plays like that. So be open to feedback. Finding the balance for a kit is very, very difficult, and is, I think, right? I mean, the technical side of this is pretty easy, right? You have a kit table, you've got some tools to use. If you know how to make spells,
right? That's 95% of making the kit, is making spells and then applying, and either applying them to the kit or gaining them as an ability, right? The technical side of it is not terribly difficult, but getting the balance right is very, very hard. And there's a reason why I left it towards the end, because there's no clear-cut answer. I mean, I've been doing this for 2 decades. I still couldn't tell you how to balance a kit. Now, that being said, the one exception are cleric kits. If you notice, cleric kits versus normal clerics are 100% advantages, right? If you compare like a kit of Lathander versus a cleric, exactly the same usability, same everything, except the Lathander gets 2 innate abilities that they can use, right? One is boon, and the other one is some anti-undead thing that I can't think of right now. So cleric kits have no disadvantages compared to their base, but everything else attempts to balance out what they get versus what gets taken away. So, like I said, there's no real clear-cut answer. And the other thing too is it also depends on classes, right? A sorcerer kit is automatically going to be better than a thief kit because sorcerers are better than thieves in this game, right? I mean, straight up, it's better to have a sorcerer in your party than a thief. Now, do you need a thief? Sure. But, 5 sorcerers and a thief is going to be way better than 5 thieves and a sorcerer. Right. And that's true for even if you're a casual player and don't care about tactical difficulties. And even if you meme and give your sorcerers infravision, you're still going to have a better time. So just balance. You need to be open to feedback, because balance is always a push-pull. It's always going to be push-pull. And you may find that players are going to find an exploit, something that you think is not like a big deal for your kit. Players may find a way to just like maximally exploit that and cheese the crap out of the game. So, because players are very, very creative. So just things to keep in mind, because that's, this is almost one of those philosophical questions about, how do you balance a kit? And again, there's no clear-cut answer. There's no clear-cut answer except that you might be wrong. Listen to feedback, be willing to change, and accept that there are multiple schools of thought from the players about, how the game, what they're looking for out of the game. So that's just kind of our wrap up. But other than that, unless you guys have any other questions, I think that's kind of it for today and really for the week. I did this because I had an unexpected opportunity because the wife was out of town. She's coming back tonight. So there might still be these in the future for the next time we travel. But otherwise, I think that's going to be it for today and again for the week. So thanks for joining. If you guys have any feedback or ideas, if we do a future series, like stuff that we can cover or go over for those, I appreciate it. But otherwise, thanks for joining. And, depending on where you are, good morning, good night, or good evening. So, all right. Thanks for joining, guys. Bye.